a bold invitation to the world's most feared leader, an African president defying the West, and a visit that could change the future of Africa forever. But what happens when the world threatens war over one man's journey to Burkina Faso? In the heart of Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré sat in his office, deep in thought. His country had suffered for too long under foreign influence, from colonial powers to international corporations that drained Africa's wealth and resources. The revolution, which had begun with Thomas Sankora's bold vision, needed to continue. For Ibrahim, the fight for sovereignty was not just a matter of politics. It was deeply personal. He knew that Africa had long been treated like a pawn on the global chessboard, but that time was over. He had made it clear. Burkina Faso would no longer play by anyone else's rules. His country would determine its own future. And if that meant taking risks, Ibrahim was ready to take them. One day, as he reviewed reports detailing Burkina Faso's international relations, an idea came to him. A bold, unconventional idea. Why not invite Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, to visit Burkina Faso? This would not only send a powerful message about Africa's unity with other nations resisting imperialism, but it would also position Burkina Faso as a country that refused to be pushed around by global superpowers. It would declare to the world that Africa was ready to form alliances on its own terms. Kim Jong-un had long been a symbol of resistance to the West. His defiance in the face of sanctions, threats, and isolation had earned him the respect of many leaders in the developing world, especially those like Ibrahim, who knew what it meant to fight for true independence. A visit from Kim would highlight Burkina Faso's refusal to bow to foreign control. Even more, it could inspire a wave of Pan-African solidarity, reminding the continent that it had the power to choose its own allies and shape its own destiny. With conviction, Ibrahim Traoré drafted and sent the invitation to Kim Jong-un, formally, asking him to become the first North Korean leader to visit Africa, specifically Burkina Faso. To Ibrahim, this was more than just a diplomatic gesture. It was a statement, a declaration. Africa was no longer a continent to be ignored or controlled. It was rising, and Burkina Faso was leading the charge. Within days, the news broke, and it spread like wildfire. The world was stunned. The idea that North Korea's leader would visit Africa, especially at a time of heightened global tensions, seemed unthinkable to many. But to those who understood the deeper meaning, it was a powerful move, one that signaled a new era of African sovereignty and bold international strategy. The implications of a historic invitation. The implications of the invitation were clear. Africa was no longer a bystander in global politics. President Ibrahim Traoré knew exactly how risky this move was. The West, particularly the United States, was unlikely to respond kindly. For years, they had pressured African leaders to distance themselves from North Korea, citing the dangers of aligning with a regime known for its nuclear ambitions and global defiance. But Ibrahim believed the time for fear had passed. Africa needed to unite, standing tall in its pursuit of freedom, dignity, and self-determination, and that meant forming unexpected alliances, even controversial ones. Then, something extraordinary happened. Kim Jong-un's response came sooner than anyone anticipated. He accepted the invitation. The world gasped. For the first time in history, a North Korean leader would be visiting Africa, and not just any part of Africa, but Burkina Faso, a country defying Western pressure and asserting its sovereignty. As anticipation began to build across Burkina Faso, so too did concern from the West. The United States and its allies voiced their disapproval. They warned Ibrahim Traoré that such a move could have dangerous consequences. Rumors swirled of diplomatic isolation, of economic sanctions, and even the possibility of military intervention. The stakes were rising, the pressure was immense, but for Ibrahim, the path was already chosen. Burkina Faso had taken a stand, and it was a stand he would not abandon. To him, this visit was not merely symbolic. It had the potential to reshape Africa's future. Ibrahim was determined to see Kim Jong-un arrive in Ouagadougou and be received with dignity. Preparations began immediately. Security measures were put in place, but a single question echoed through the streets, the airwaves, and the halls of government. Would the world allow this visit to happen? Or would the forces of imperialism try to stop it before it even began? As news of Kim Jong-un's acceptance spread, global reactions intensified. The United States, France, and other Western powers made their opposition known. Official warnings were sent to the Burkinabe government, permitting Kim to set foot on African soil would come with consequences, sanctions, diplomatic backlash, possibly worse. There were whispers, covert operations, attempts to sabotage the visit before it could take place. Still, Ibrahim Traoré remained resolute. He understood what was at stake. He knew this visit would bring far more than headlines. It was an opportunity to galvanize African unity, to demonstrate that Africa was no longer beholden to the agendas of former colonizers. In quiet moments alone in his office, the weight of the world pressing down upon him, Ibrahim thought about the revolution that Thomas Sankara had begun decades earlier. That dream still lived inside him. This was never just about one leader's visit. It was about Africa's independence. It was about its right to choose its own allies. The time had come for Africa to step fully out of the shadows of colonialism and into the light of sovereignty. However, despite Ibrahim's unwavering determination, serious concerns loomed about the security of the visit. Kim Jong-un's arrival in Burkina Faso would not be just another diplomatic event. The world was watching, and tensions were high. North Korea's relationship with the West had always been volatile. The United States had made it explicitly clear they would not tolerate Kim Jong-un traveling through Africa without consequences. Ibrahim and his top advisors were fully aware of the risks. This was no longer just about politics. It was about logistics, protection, and international security. How could they guarantee the safety of Kim Jong-un without triggering a global incident? But Kim Jong-un came prepared. His delegation included a heavily fortified military aircraft, equipped not only for transport but for defense. It was capable of carrying nuclear missiles, a stark message to anyone thinking of intercepting the journey. If the West tried to interfere, if they attempted to detain him or disrupt the visit, it could escalate into a global conflict. As the day of arrival drew closer, President Ibrahim Traoré met repeatedly with his highest-ranking military and security officials. They planned for every possible scenario. Contingency plans were drafted. Troops were mobilized. The last thing Ibrahim wanted was to see Burkina Faso become a battlefield in a global power struggle. But he would not back down. He trusted in the strength of his people, in the loyalty of his forces, and in the necessity of this moment. This was history in the making. The strategy was straightforward. Ensure that the visit happened without external interference. North Korean and Burkinabe security forces would jointly protect Kim Jong-un. The world could protest, object, and threaten, but it would not stop this from happening. The date was set. Kim Jong-un's arrival in Ouagadougou was scheduled for early next month. The government worked around the clock to prepare. The capital was placed on high alert. Military patrols secured the streets. Civilian areas near the arrival route were cleared. Excitement surged across the nation. The people of Burkina Faso were ready. They were about to witness a historic moment, one that could forever change their country, their continent, and perhaps the world. The narrative of Africa's place in the world was shifting. As preparations for Kim Jong-un's historic visit continued, Western diplomats intensified their pressure on Burkina Faso. Private messages were sent directly to President Ibrahim Traoré, warning him of the consequences. They made it explicitly clear. Hosting the North Korean leader would damage Burkina Faso's diplomatic relationships with the West. Sanctions would follow, and the country could face serious isolation. On the international stage, President Ibrahim faced a difficult choice. Would he allow his nation to be intimidated and coerced by global powers? Or would he stand firm in his commitment to African sovereignty? In a private meeting with his closest advisors, Ibrahim made his decision clear. "We cannot allow ourselves to be pawns any longer," he declared, his voice steady with determination. "This visit is more than just a moment for us. It is a message to the world that Africa is free. Free to make its own choices. Free to determine its own future. If they try to stop us, we will not back down. We will show them that we are not afraid of the consequences." Despite the mounting tension, preparations for Kim Jong-un's arrival continued at full speed. The people of Burkina Faso rallied behind their president. For many, the visit symbolized something larger than politics. It was a show of strength, a step forward in the ongoing struggle to break free from external control. The streets of Ouagadougou buzzed with anticipation. Murals were painted, banners were raised, and spontaneous gatherings broke out across the city. This was more than a diplomatic gesture. It was history in the making, and as the world watched with bated breath, one thing was certain. This visit would mark a new chapter in the story of Africa's relationship with global powers. In the final days leading up to Kim's arrival, the atmosphere was charged with both excitement and anxiety. Would everything go according to plan? Or would the looming threat of international retaliation overshadow the moment? In the face of uncertainty, one thing remained clear. President Ibrahim Traoré was ready to confront whatever came next. As the day of Kim Jong-un's arrival drew closer, tensions escalated rapidly. The air in Ouagadougou grew heavier with anticipation. On every street corner, citizens gathered to discuss the unprecedented event, their voices full of hope, curiosity, and pride. Government officials worked tirelessly around the clock, ensuring that security measures were airtight. The capital had never experienced an event of such magnitude, and the mood was an electrifying mix of national pride and quiet unease. But this wasn't just about Kim Jong-un. It was about Burkina Faso's identity. It was about Africa's right to shape its destiny. The eyes of the world were focused on this small West African nation, and the weight of that scrutiny was immense. The city was transformed in preparation. Military checkpoints were installed at strategic points. Roads were cleared for official convoys. Surveillance systems and tactical units were deployed across Ouagadougou. The government had mobilized every resource available to ensure the visit would go smoothly and without incident. President Ibrahim Traoré addressed the nation once more, calling for unity. He urged his people to rise to the moment and demonstrate to the world that Africa could define itself, not by its struggles, but by its resilience, its courage, and its principles. This was not merely a diplomatic visit. It was a bold declaration of self-determination,